Hello there. It's Colleen again, the Preparedness Pro with our Preparedness Pro pop-in today. I am, as usual, struggling with Instagram. It just that button just doesn't want to get pushed sometimes. I don't know why. Um, anyway, I didn't join you on Thursday and Friday because there was just way too much commotion going on. There was some construction going on, and the drilling and the hammering. You wouldn't have enjoyed it. You'd been going, huh? What'd you say? And I would like much better participation, and for other reasons than you can't hear me. So today I wanted to talk to you about, I wanted to share with you about a process known as warning out. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. I was never taught about this in history class, or I've never come across it in any of my history readings or anything of that nature. And all of these books that you see over here, those are all history books. All these books behind me, they're all marketing and sales books because I'm a marketing and sales geek. What can I say? My preparedness library is in another room, and it's about as big as what you see behind me. Anyway, another topic. So I wanted to share with you about this warning out process because I think it's interesting. It's kind of like a aha moment. But before I did that, I wanted to share with you. One of the things that I was writing about in the book is various milk options that people had and shelf stable. Now, obviously, powdered milk, it's usually non-fat, and some people would prefer the whole milk. And you can buy whole powdered milk. There's all kinds of options, but Costco is offering a shelf-stable organic whole milk, and I got it today. It tastes fantastic. It's shelf-stable, but it's not shelf-stable for 25, 30 years. This that I got today has a best by date, which I ignore, but the best by date is July 2025, and today is September 3rd of 2024, so that's something. I would just use this if I was out of milk, out of powdered milk, or I didn't want to open up a number 10 can of powdered milk, and just needed a little bit of milk for a recipe or something like that. But I just wanted you to know that there are shelf-stable whole milks out there that you could get. Trader Joe's also carries shelf-stable milk, and I believe Aldi's does as well if you have access to either of those stores. I'm sure there's more, but you could also order from Costco online. You don't have to have a Costco in your vicinity to have a Costco membership and to order from Costco online. You could still get that for yourself. So anyway, just a couple things. Oh, here's an interesting thing. They had a shelf-stable garlic bread. And I had just read the other day about Aldi's having a shelf-stable garlic bread. And then I'm at Costco and I took a double take. I'm like, what? Like, we need a shelf-stable garlic bread. I did not bother to find out how shelf-stable it was because I would just make my own garlic bread, for crying out loud. But I just thought that was interesting. Of all the things that somebody woke up one day and decided they were going to create is a shelf-stable garlic bread, because we need that, I guess. Anyway, so let's talk about this warning out. So this was practiced in the 17th and 18th century. It got phased out at the end of the 18th century, but it was a practice that was put into play in England. So the Puritans brought it with them. This practice is a very severe practice based on someone's ability to be self-sufficient. And it was practiced more in New England, more so in New England than in the Western, the wide open wilderness. But basically, if you went into a town and you were new there, you would be looked upon suspiciously as to whether or not you could take care of yourself. And if they were to believe that you couldn't take care of yourself, well, then, holy cow, there was a problem. You would be given what they call a warning out. So you would be given instructions that you were to leave the town. You would be forcibly removed to go back to the town where you were born, because they wanted that town to bear the financial and otherwise other burdens of taking care of you. If you were indigent, if you had needs, Now, this was applied. It didn't matter if you were a widow. It didn't matter that you were a widow because your husband died in the war. It didn't matter if you fought in the war and you were wounded in the war, and thus you couldn't take care of yourself as well as someone else. It didn't matter if you were getting up there in years. In fact, you were forced to start saving for your coffin costs because they started looking at you suspiciously as you got older, because they're looking at the cost of wood that they're going to have to pay for your coffin if you were to die. So you could get a warning out simply because you started getting older and couldn't afford your own coffin. Now, isn't that interesting? The self-sufficiency aspect, that was so important. They did not want to put the burden on the town for someone who wasn't from there. That's where they drew the line. They figured they had to draw the line somewhere. Why not draw it there? Now, the interesting thing is, sorry, my nose always itches when I do these things. I don't know why. Maybe someone's talking about me. The interesting thing is if you were a professor or a teacher or a minister, you would usually get a pass. You would also usually get a pass if you bought land. Then you showed that you were a contributing citizen. And sometimes there were strategic marriages done, arranged marriages even. If you married a landowner, then you could stay. But sometimes this broke families apart. So I came across this in genealogical studies. In fact, the warning out records have become a great resource in genealogical studies now. That's how come I even know about this. So we'll just call them the Johnsons. So they were given a warning out notice. He was born in one place. She was born in another place. And their 3 children were each born in a different place. The family was separated and they never saw each other again. So that's how strict they took this. And I think it's interesting that they took something with them from England that was so abrasive. It's definitely the darker side of self-sufficiency. It was so abrasive that it's separating families forever. They didn't matter what kind of consequences there were to restoring you back to your home place, or your homeland. It just didn't matter. They were going to send you back regardless. It brings whole new meaning to immigration, of how they handled immigration. Native Americans were always given warning out. The wealthy played a role, an influence on warning out. It's also how they got rid of British loyalists, is they gave them warning out notices. So they could get, that was one of the ploys that they used to get rid of British loyalists. This is interesting. I did not realize this. I must be very naive, but there were a lot of unwed mothers. I just thought they just didn't do that back then, but apparently I'm wrong. They used to be able to not set the clocks. That's the wrong term, but they used to be able to count on the months when babies would be conceived based on how high the corn was, because then people could go out in the corn and do their business and then have the babies 9 months later. Particularly with soldiers, that's a lot of the unwed mothers. I just thought that was very, very interesting. But these unwed mothers would be given warning outs constantly, either losing their beau in the war and thus never able to marry him, or he just had no interest in supporting a wife and a child. So I find it very interesting about that application of self-sufficiency. And so I ask myself, because I certainly don't want to participate, if you will, in the darker side of things. I ask myself, what could we learn from this application of something so stark? One of the things that they did do is they would um, persuade skilled laborers to their town. And one of the things that they would give them consideration for is they would promise not to warn them out. Um, Sometimes they would give them 3 months, not the skilled laborers, just anybody. They would give them 3 months to prove that they could support themselves. Not every town did this, 3 months. Some towns just did weeks. But 3 months was typically the normal practice. Every town had their own way of applying the rules of warning out. But what do you think? What do you think could be done in a society down scenario? What do you think should be done for those who can't help themselves? I just had a dear friend of mine who was building a new property. They've got their act together. Certainly no fault of their own. A tornado hit their new property that's under construction. And they had taken a loan out on their existing property, which is for sale, to pay for the new under construction property. And so now they're in a pickle. All of a sudden they went from everything honky-dory to, oh crap, we're going to need a miracle or two. This is a dear friend of mine who's helped me when I've been in trouble. There's always more to the story. There's always more than just whether or not somebody has 12 months supply of food and water. What kind of skills do they have? What kind of knowledge do they have? What kind of expertise and contribution could they make to the community, to the group? That's definitely something to consider. It's just me here at the house, if you don't count the furry family members. And I'm still being very zealous in my preparation efforts. And I do so that I can barter for the physical help that I need, the skilled trade that I might need and want. That's part of my plans. And I'm certainly not going to look at somebody and say, well, you can't be self-sufficient on your own. So get thee hence. Anyway, it's just something to think about. I just thought this was really interesting. It's definitely put into practice in the 17th century. And we all know what war was going on in the 17th century, 1776, in case you didn't know. And then you got the 1819 war. Anyway, it just food for thought. That's it for today. Just giving you something to think about. I will be back tomorrow. Maybe I'll give you something to think about then too. I don't know. I'm not that profound, but just sharing with you what's bouncing around in this brain of mine. I hope you all had a great weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.